when I was in middle school, so I had my first menstrual cycle and then never came back again. In high school, I saw a fertility specialist here in Houston, Texas, and he diagnosed me with the worst case of PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Unfortunately, most people know what PCOS is.
Hmm.
When I first started out, I had to explain what that was, but um, it was one of the worst cases he had ever seen in his practice. My ovaries were completely covered with cysts, and I didn't really have any symptoms other than amenorrhea and maybe a little bit of acne, but why not just take some Accutane for that and,
Mm.
get on birth control while you're at it. And, back then, this was 2003 for me. Um, they didn't understand the lifestyle component of polycystic ovarian syndrome. It was very much, this is what you have. You take birth control indefinitely. You will not be able to conceive naturally, but we will have the best fertility treatments for you when you are ready to have a baby. So I, at that time, and listen, I have so much respect for doctors, surgeons. I do not know what we would do without them. But at that time, they were God to me. I mean, if you had a white coat, you knew it all. There
Hmm.
was no questioning. And I really owned that diagnosis. And this was a few years before I understood that we actually need to be our own advocates and that we should ask questions and that we should fight for
Hmm.
our health. Everything that the medical community tells us is true. In fact, a lot of it's not. Most of it's not sometimes. So yeah, like I said, I owned it. Went off to college. Met Kelly, my best friend and co-founder, on the outside, still taking my birth control and my Accutane and all the things. But I started coming down with, let's see, it started off as kind of like, oh, my shoulders are kind of sore. Maybe I slept wrong. And then it went down to my back. So I was getting, regular PT and acupuncture and rolfing. And it really became this thing. I'm like, gosh, I'm in so much pain all the time. What's going on? I'm healthy. I mean, this is bizarre. I've never had anything in my life like this. Um, so by my, let's see, spring of my sophomore year, I was registered as a student with disabilities because I couldn't sit through class.
Mm.
I was now doing regular steroid injections. I was on hydrocodone twice a day. I was on muscle relaxers and sleeping pills, antidepressants,
Wow.
because I couldn't sleep because of the pain. I was sleeping on ice packs that would quite literally burn my skin to the point of I would wake up with blood on my sheets because the pain from the ice was better than the pain in my body. And this was
Damn.
even on papers. So my body was just out of control, going downhill, and nobody understood why.
Mm.
So I was this kind of medical mystery. I was, EKGs and MRIs and CAT scans and X-rays. And I mean, you name it, I did it. Um, and trigger point therapy up in Philadelphia, arthritis specialist. So no one could say I wasn't doing it all. And this was about the time that my Aunt Marilee came into the picture. And she is my real aunt, not just an endearing term. But I didn't know her super well at this time. She had some health issues herself, and then her son, which I will later explain, was also struggling with some health issues. So she lived out in the Texas Hill Country. She didn't have a cell phone. She wasn't super social. They kind of did their own thing. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't know. They're like making their own food, and they don't use toxic, they use, regular soap or something to do their laundry. I don't know what's going on over there. But I finally had ears to hear her, and she called me one day and I was really at rock bottom. And she started explaining to me that the body has the ability to heal no
Mm.
matter what it's going through. And that if there are symptoms like the ones that are manifesting in my body, those are sirens going off. And to continue to give the body these medications is really to basically take the fire alarm battery out, but not address the fire.
Mm.
So it made sense to me. And at the same time, I was like, okay, but I've seen the best people, in the nation, and they can't figure me out. So I don't really know what you have for me here. But she starts asking me about my diet. I'm like, no one's asked me about my diet. She starts asking me about my home products, whether I recently moved, whether I recently remodeled, because all of the toxic materials that can come with that. later looking back, I realized that a lot of my symptoms started actually when I moved into a brand new apartment, ridden with all the formaldehyde and the fresh paint, windows that didn't open, and the toxic carpet. I mean, you name it. But as much as what she was saying sounded crazy, it was actually the very first time that there was something that I could do. Every single other person that had come into my life to try to help me never asked me anything about my lifestyle. It was all about genetics. It was about symptoms. It was about drugs that I was on, things that other, doctors had asked me or told me. And I thought, man, there's like a glimmer of hope here. I mean, there is something I can do. So I thought, okay, as crazy as this sounds, like I am all in. I'm at rock bottom. There's nothing, there's nowhere else for me to turn. So I started flipping over the, labels, my boxes of cereal and the Splenda and the 100-calorie packs. And I'm like, for the very first time, I am reading ingredients at 20 years old, talking. And I got rid of my Windex, and I got rid of the paint cans that were still laying around, and the dryer sheets and the candles. And I could only do so much because I'm living in a sorority house with other girls at the time. But I noticed pretty immediately that I was actually able to drop down on doses of painkillers. And I was definitely seeing shifts in my body. And I thought, okay, she's onto something here. So Kelly's my roommate at the time. She's been watching me now for a couple of years, and she is like, wow, this is the very first time Allison has really seen a shift. So she and I, it's just funny how some people are attracted to things like this and some people aren't. She's a twin sister who also lived with us, and she was like, y'all are kind of crazy. I'm so glad Allison's better, but not really interested in this. Kelly is like latched on. So graduation's approaching, graduation from college, and we decided we're going to go live with Marilee in the hill country. So we call her up, and she's like, okay, this is the craziest ask ever. This must be God. I don't know, but sure, come live with me for 8 weeks. So little did she know that those 8 weeks would completely change our lives. So we go out there, and I want to stop here and diverge a little bit, because if I don't tell you about Marilee's story, none of this really makes sense. So really quickly, there's 2 catastrophic events that happened in Marilee's life that led her to where she was when we moved to her home. In her 20s, she grew up here in Houston, Texas, just like me. She was told she needed a kidney transplant, and she was sick all the time, fevers of unknown origin. No one could figure her out. They did all these kind of, really invasive kind of diagnostic type surgeries. And she discovered food as medicine during this really critical time period. And she basically looked at the doctors and said, I respect you, but I will not remove my kidney. I'm going to see if there's something else that I can do about this. So for 10 days only, she ate only real food. She got rid of every single processed food, every excitotoxin, every additive, every pesticide, and just got back to basics. And at the end of those 10 days, she had her kidney numbers were completely different. She avoided dialysis. She has not been on a prescription drug since, and she, I believe, is now 74 at this point. Wow. So it's amazing. So fast forward a couple decades later, she has a 10-year-old son, my first cousin. He was exposed to chlordane, which is a now banned pesticide at school. Overnight, he went from this intelligent and obedient and joyful and athletic and strong and healthy boy to can't walk a straight line, can't spell a 3-letter word. Wow. He is so sensitive, you had to whisper to even speak to him. His lymph nodes would swell like BBs if he came in contact with any sort of chemical. So nearly they sought the absolute best doctors, post war veterans who had gone through chemical exposures like this, and toxicologists and such. They basically said, you have to have 16 shots a day, keep him comfortable. He's going to be a bubble boy for the rest of his life. Once again, Marilee had that same feeling rise up. This is not his story. I respect you and I respect where you're coming from, but we're going to figure this out. So the first catastrophe led her to food as medicine, opened her eyes to the power of our diet. The second one filled that whole other, I would even say 50% kind of missing piece that people still aren't understanding, and it is that of our environment. So we can have this perfect diet. But if we are coming home to a house full of pesticides and synthetic fragrances and using scented trash bags and dryer sheets and sleeping on pillowcases with fragrances, we're just not able to uptake and utilize those minerals of our diet. And we're constantly asking our body to detoxify this just barrage of chemicals. So over the next 7 years, she said if she only knew what she knew now, it probably would have been only a year or so. But it basically took 7 years. She had to keep removing certain chemicals from the house. And finally, when she completely cleared her home of toxic chemicals, they had to live outside in a tent actually for a couple of years.
Wow.
Because he was so chemically sensitive, he couldn't come inside. But once she had removed that very last box that she thought, oh, there's no way, it was her favorite perfumes and cleaning products. And she was out in the tent one night and she thought, okay, what am I missing? How can he be outside and not inside? She went in, removed the box. The next day he comes in for lunch. He usually could only stay inside about 7 to 10 minutes or he would get super agitated and have to go out. And he said, Mom, what did you do? I don't feel any different. And it was that one box that was behind a door. She thought there's no way this is going to make a difference. And so she was going down the grocery store aisle a couple of days later and she went down the cleaning products aisle and it just dawned on her, okay, if these products are closed shut and unused and I can smell them on a parts per million, billion, trillion level in my home, that little box is creating this chemical soup. And someone like Douglas is super, super sensitive and immunocompromised, is going to be affected by that at a really small amount. So after that, that was really the crux of his recovery. He ended up being the first homeschool child to graduate from the United States Naval Academy. Wow. And he was top of his class physically and intellectually. It was just an amazing story. So that is the home that I am now entering when I come in 2008. And it is completely free of every single toxic chemical. There is no fragrance. It's basically an extension of the outdoors. So for 8 weeks, I'm living in this home and my body is thriving. I could feel just every day I'm becoming more and more alive. I'm grounding. We are eating real food and rebounding, and we're off of our cell phones. We're doing all these crazy things that now everyone's doing, using the sauna. And, back then juice was orange juice, but we're drinking beets and carrots and kale and such. And sure enough, at the end of those 8 weeks, I was off all my medication. Wow. I was virtually pain-free. I ended up going to the same fertility doctor several months later, and the cysts are virtually all gone. My period ended up coming back naturally. I was off all birth control when I started working with Mary. And I wasn't even as strict at that time, but I understood and I live the way that I live now. And I've done this now for 14 years. I mean, I avoid refined sugar. I eat organic almost all of the time. I don't eat out much, but I mean, for me, it is a boundary to my freedom. People always say, oh my gosh, how do you live this way? This sounds so restricting. I'm thinking, what's restricting? Doctor's visits and drugs and the ability to, not get out of your bed. I mean, those are the things that are restricting. So this to me is so much freedom, so much life. And so we've tried 3 times and gotten pregnant 4 times. So here I am, pregnant with my 4th child. And it's really just such a testimony to the power of Pure and the things that we put on and around our body. So the reason that we started Branch Basics was because we wanted to put Marilee's brain on the internet. After that summer, we thought, why didn't somebody tell me this? Like, how have we grown up in these, this conventional world from educated families, and we have paid all this money for education our entire lives and seen the best doctors. And this is the first time we're hearing that our bodies can heal in this way. Excuse me. So that's where we are now. And we're selling soap. And more importantly, we're really trying to sell the message of the power of Pure, help people identify toxins, remove them from their homes, from their personal care products, from their supplements. Because it all matters. It's all going to the same place. And once we do that, our bodies are able to run in the direction of healing.